What's going on, animators? Aaron here from CG Riff, and we're so pleased to have all of you joining us here tonight for episode number 19 of the CG Riff Animation Podcast. And I'm thrilled to have as our guest tonight, Sir Wade Neistadt is in the hot seat. Most of you are probably familiar with his work from YouTube. He's got tons of great videos over there. I've been watching them through the years. I was just telling him I've been a fan of his work for a long time. He's got a really interesting journey through, coming up kind of in the animation trajectory. I'll let him get into all of that. Was a trainer over at DreamWorks for a number of years and has transitioned into content creation. Has got some really great, very informative YouTube videos. I highly suggest you check out all of those if you haven't. Definitely subscribe to his channel. But again, glad all of you are here tonight joining us. So thrilled to get into your story, hear about your journey, Sir Wade. So welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Great. Let's jump right into it. We've got plenty of topics we'll try to get into tonight, but take us all the way back. Can you talk about where did you grow up and how did your love for animation or filmmaking come about? How did you find your way into the interest in the industry?
Sure. Well, I grew up in a desert town in the middle of nowhere in California called Apple Valley, which has no apples growing in it, despite the name. And it's basically, if you've ever seen The Hangover, the movie, where they're like driving back from Vegas, trying to get to the wedding, there's palm trees, Joshua trees, those desert trees. And, they're throwing the tuxes from the van to the car. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm totally alienating you. But that stretch of road where there's nothing, that road goes right through my town. That was what it looked like where I grew up. It was just dirt, a couple mountains, Joshua trees, nothing. And so that was reflected in sort of the school system we had in the area. I didn't get exposed to any of this stuff. I had no idea you could do anything creative as a job. I mean, I kind of was vaguely aware, people make games and stuff, but I didn't really know that was a path. So anyway, watched all the Disney movies. Toy Story was a big influence growing up when I was, a kid. That was, I think my first theater movie was Toy Story or something. That's what my parents say. Yeah. I don't know. But anyways, I guess the first time I ever started just playing around was I started finding 3D software online when that started becoming an option, or pivot stick figure animator was my first exposure to animation as an actual thing you could play with, which was the most basic little stick figure program that had little pivot point on the hips where you could move the entire character around and you could just move, each joint on a stick figure. And it was basically stop motion animation in the computer. Yeah. And that was my obsession. I loved that. So the early days of animation on the internet, on YouTube, before it was YouTube, Newgrounds and Google Video, stick figure fights were the thing. And I ate those up and I started making those back in the day. If I had kept posting from the time I was first animating, heavy quotes on animating, I think my YouTube channel would have done a lot better because I would have been there so much longer, but that's okay. Anyway, I'm jumping all around, but to answer your question, my initial interest just came from the Disney movies and other animated movies that I was watching growing up. And it wasn't until I went to college, and it was in my first quarter semester, whatever, of college, where I was in for computer science, that I discovered there's this 3D tool called Maya that they actually use at places like ILM to build stuff so that they can destroy it in 3D. Oh, and that they can make the character. Oh yeah, because I guess Iron Man's not really there. So, and it was this ILM breakdown behind the magic of the Avengers that I remember watching. Those different, they had Battleship and then Transformers, and they had all these videos where they would take a scene and they deconstruct it and show the compositing and all these layers. I'm like, whoa, people do that as a job. I want to learn how to do that. And so that was sort of my first, my early trying to play with animation as a fun thing, and then eventually realizing this thing I've been kind of just goofing around with for all these years, there's actually a career path here. I wonder how you do that.
So did you continue on with the computer science track at that point, or was there a pivot that happened in terms of or was it more kind of self-taught in the computer graphic? I mean, in the software kind of on the side while you were still doing the computer graphics degree?
It's kind of a mix. I had a really bizarre path through school where I was very extracurricular focused in high school, and I was school president. I was an ASB. I started off just in clubs. I was in Key Club, and I started a parkour club because I was into that. And I joined ASB, student government. I was planning events and that kind of thing. Eventually, I was school president. So I was like doing all these fun things, not focused on school. I was like an AP student, and I was in the advanced classes for the most part. But I wouldn't really do the assignments. I'd never do the reading. Like I was good at some subjects, less good at other subjects, but school was never my focus. And so I didn't really pay much attention when it was like, oh, time to apply for colleges. Yeah, I'll just throw a couple applications. Oh, the school that has computer science, because I like computers, that they don't have a computer science program. It's just a business school. I'll figure it out. So like I went to this school in California where, I went for computer science, but they had like 2 classes for computer science, and I took those. And then it was like, great. Now what? And so as I was like, I think I made some mistakes along the way, I was also just at that same time like, animation. There's no classes for that here, but there was a community college near the school I was going to that had one Maya class. And it was just like a general like intro to 3D and Maya. And I took that, and that was super cool. It was like, a little bit of modeling, a little bit of all the pieces, and that was my first exposure to actually like download the software and start playing with it. And then from there, it was very much trying to self-teach for a couple of months. And then I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to I think I did this whole school thing very wrong. So I ended up dropping out of the university I was at and going to another community college in Northern California, because I figured, well, ILM and Pixar are there. There's got to be schools that teach this kind of stuff. I don't know if animation's a viable career choice yet, so I'll still stick with computer science for now. So I'll pick a community college that does both, because I really didn't like the school I was at anyway. So I was like, I'm not going to stick around. I'll just go up here. And so I picked Kenyatta College up in Redwood City, up in the Bay Area of California. And they had a computer science program, and they had an animation program. And they were one of the only community colleges that had that combo. And so it was there that I remember I was always struggling. Like, do I pursue computer science, or do I jump ship and try to go figure out animation? And it was Milena Huang. She was a rigging character TD at DreamWorks and PDI, who came and did a guest speaking session at the school. And she was talking about her work on Madagascar 2, and like, here's, how we did all the rigging and all this stuff. And I still was shaky on like the differences between like rigging versus animation and all the pieces of the pipeline. And I remember loving the presentation, and I went up to her after and I said, I've been trying to get this question answered. No one seems to know. Do I pursue a computer science degree? Because it seems like that kind of maps to animation, and it seems like you've done a lot of that as well. Or do I need to do something else if I want to like be an animator, for example? Because I was also stuck on, do I want to do effects or animation? I really like both. And she told me, if you want to like build the tools, if you want to, be able to also work for NASA, like if you want to, like, there's these different things you can do that kind of ride the line between computer graphics and computer science. And like, this side's open to you if you continue on your current path. But if you want to be doing the creative art stuff, you should probably switch to some kind of art institution, some kind of art school, some kind of online program, or, something, and explore that. And I was like, that's, I think, what I want to do. And so, there's more to the story, but essentially that was the most helpful piece of information that I was like, I think I'm on the wrong track. I like computer science, but I don't love computer science. Yes, I need to switch to some kind of creative animation focused program.
Okay, cool. And so I assume you couldn't do that at the community college you were at. So what was your next kind of step on your journey? Where did you seek out that next learning?
It was very accidental, but the next piece of the journey was a really big wrench in the gears in a good way. There was this group that was going around different colleges around the country called Campus Movie Fest. I don't know if there's still a thing, but they basically showed up to different schools, and they had a booth. They pop up and I think it was like, win an Adobe license. I was like, ooh, I want to win an Adobe license. I've never used After Effects before, but I know that's a cool effects tool. And it was like, hey, sign up for this thing. Here's a camera. Here's a week. Here's sign out the laptop or whatever. You get 1 week to make a movie. Go. Ooh, cool. And I was watching Film Riot and Video Copilot, and I was watching all these tutorials, and I was really into like the filmmaking side of things while I was taking my computer science classes. And so I participated in this like movie challenge thing, and I made this live action short film that was about a 6 superhero who gets called into work anyway. He sneezes, blows up a wall, rubbing his eyes, lasers, right? And I made that movie, And it, through its, I think, lack of good competition and some originality, not through any kind of skill, that movie ended up winning Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Special Effects. It won all these like regional awards, which was really cool. I was really glad I didn't go to a film school at that moment because there weren't a whole lot of submissions at my school. And it was just weird enough that it got selected to be screened at the Cannes Film Festival, in which I had to Google at the time because I was like, what is that? Google it. Like, oh, red carpets and fan. Oh, okay, this is a big thing. I get to go to France. I have to pay for it and all, but I can go. And
not bad for that was literally your first film?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Which when I tell this, it's really cool. Yeah. I mean, it's a really cool experience. And I didn't realize until much later, like what a big deal that was. Although I do have to make sure I caveat always, but like that was like, I had no microphone. It was filmed with on-camera audio. Like it wasn't a good movie. It was very much through, the good fortune of this being part of some student, whatever. It was a good system, worked out. And I went to the Cannes Film Festival. I'm there in France, and watching. There's this whole screening circuit of these films that are being presented. And that particular year, 2014, How to Train Your Dragon 2 they were screening it at the red carpet premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. And I remember at that point I was keyed in enough to the animation world to understand, like, okay, wait, that person's the head of character animation at DreamWorks. He's like in charge of all the animators. Simon Otto. Okay, I recognize him from interviews. Like I was piecing things together, but I still hadn't made the decision to fully jump out of computer science until this event. Being there, seeing kind of that world of film and going, yeah, this is the thing. Like I want to get into this, whatever this thing is. And I remember it was the red carpet premiere of How to Train Your Dragon 2. Specifically, I had gotten tickets through the program. We could get tickets, but our tickets weren't very good. But I ended up swapping somehow for really good tickets that were like 3 rows behind the actual like producer, director, all the kind of crew that was there. And at the end of the movie, watching this movie on this giant screen, they stand up. We're all applauding. I'm like, I want to work with them. Like that's the group I want to be with. I'm dropping out of school. And so I went back to the hotel. I called my parents. Time zones worked out well. They're like, oh, we're just getting up. Like, I'm just going to bed. And I remember I was just like, so I think I'm going to drop out of school. And my parents, luckily, were always very supportive. They know that I'm not just going to say that without some kind of a plan. So like, okay, we assume you have a plan. Excited to hear about it. Glad you're having fun. Go, just sure. Like I was essentially calling for like, no one's going to freak out, right? She's like, and my mom was like, you're going to probably have to explain this to, the family a little bit, but it's your life, do your thing. And so I was like, cool. So I went through the rest of the festival knowing like, great, I'll finish up the next couple of weeks. Maybe I'll take my finals. I don't know, but I'm going to leave and I'm going to find an online program. And I ended up going to Animation Mentor at the time, which, fast forwards a bit, but that was sort of the moment I was like, yes, I'm going to do it. And then I left and then I went to Animation Mentor, and that's a whole story on its own. But that was my sort of decision point of.
So at that point you mentioned so I've seen, I think, pieces of the superhero, the live action film, and you've touched effects, and you mentioned After Effects before and all these types of things. So at this point, did you realize that animation, like character animation specifically, was kind of the thing you wanted to sort of hone in on? Because obviously Animation Mentor is kind of hyper focused on that. So did you realize like somewhere along that way that that's the part of the pipeline you wanted to be kind of most involved in? I know you had talked to the rigor from DreamWorks of these things. Had you kind of honed in on that?
Yeah, I definitely knew that animation, like character animation, was the thing that most interested me. But I do think, looking back, I actually think that a part of that was not actually being able to see the whole pipeline back then. Because at this time, I mean, I don't know where the age line is where it's like people older than this or younger than this will or won't know this information. But it's like, this wasn't all that long ago, but this was in 2013, 2014, where like you couldn't look on YouTube for information on this stuff. Like if you looked up anything about animation, you might find a couple of really, really dry Maya tutorials. It's just like a screen recording, some voice, it's really bad audio that's like, here's how to do this one thing in Maya, da 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 da. And then as far as like advice, experiences, maybe you'd find some like bonus feature on some specific Blu-ray, DVD, whatever, on some movie where, some Disney person be like, yeah, I called Disney in the 90s. They said, you've used a computer? Come on in. That's how I got in the job. And that's it. There was like irrelevant information that did not help with like career advice of like, how do I get into this? No idea. Or there's like Maya tutorials here and there. And then there's a couple of books, but there wasn't any way to really see the pipeline. So I had no idea what the jobs were. It was really just like those ILM videos that I was like, someone makes it, someone textures it, someone makes it move. Well, the moving part looks the coolest. I don't think I want to put the bones in it. I tried that in my one Maya class. I didn't really like rigging. I didn't like UVs. Animation was the most, I guess I'll go with that. And it was fortunate that I ended up really liking animation, instead of just falling into it. But I always had that question. Like, as I learned more, I was always like, should I have done effects or should I have done, because character animation and effects were the two that I was always sort of they were always competing with each other for me. But animation is the one that there were more resources for. And so it's the one that I got better at faster and started falling in love with because I actually got to experience it. And so I pursued it. But even to this day, like I'm like, jumping to today for a second, like I'm actively learning Houdini. Like I'm still pursuing the effects side of things while I do animation. It's never gone away. But yes, animation was the thing I chose, but I can't remember why. It was more of just like, it was there.
Yeah. And like you said, there were resources specifically for that, but at that point, Animation Mentor and some of these places were kind of in full swing in that way. But yeah, maybe less so for some of the more hyper specific, for rigging or effects and some of these things. It was a little kind of harder to find your way, which will lead me in a bit to your how to become an animator, because I think it's great that you mentioned that the resources were sort of limited and sort of scattershot at the time, because I find the information that you've put out and the videos that you've put out have always been very vulnerable, very open, like this is me on the journey, come along on the journey with me, and in that sort of way. And so there's like an approachability factor, like you said, instead of just like no face, just a voice over this, like, just looking at Maya and somebody's like spinning a cube around. So I think you tapped into something really nice there. We'll kind of transition to that in a bit. But okay, so at this point you're an animation mentor. Who were some of the people you were learning from? Who were some of your mentors there?
Well, it's funny, when I first signed up for the program, I was like, ooh, creatures and dragons. Like, I want to take that class. So I actually signed up for a really advanced class, and the school like called me and was like, have you animated before? No, first time. You maybe should start at the beginning. Like, oh, is there a beginning? My bad. Where do I? So they kind of saved my butt there, because that wouldn't have gone well. But I started with, I had Jay Davis, who at the time, I don't know where everybody is now, but at the time when it was like, as my mentor, he was at Disney Feature. And then I had Scott Lemmer at DreamWorks, who's I've now worked with in a bunch of different areas as well. Actually, I'll say it now. Scott's great. Scott was my second mentor I ever had. Learned a ton from him. He's fantastic. When I eventually started working at DreamWorks, he was the first person that I realized, like, oh my God, wait, you work here. And so we got coffee and we chatted, and then he went off to Blue Sky and he was working on Nimona, and then he's at Epic now. Okay. I think he's supervising or directing animation for Lego Fortnite. I forget his exact role, but anyway, we've kept in touch. And it was cool, second mentor ever, and we still talk. But and then I had Mike Gassaway, who I remember his like thing that he was known for was like Jimmy Neutron. It's like, oh, he worked on Jimmy Neutron, that's cool. Keith Sinte, ILM, Steve Cady, I think he was at Sony ImageWorks at the time, and then Sean Sexton, which I think most animation mentor grads either had Sean or know Sean, and he's just an amazing animator, but also an amazing mentor. He's a really good teacher, and I feel like it's that class that I feel like I've figured out how to animate. I'm like, oh, that's how it all works. Got it.
So you sounds like you came through the whole program, right? You started.
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Although
awesome.
I will caveat that I definitely did it wrong. Again, I have a habit of doing school wrong, it seems, where I treated it like regular school. Like, I didn't realize how different animation is and how you need to learn it than from like regular, like school is a very misleading word, I think, for animation. Cause like I went through it with the same attitude that I went through regular school. It was like, okay, you just go through as quick as you can to get to the end, and then you've done it. you do the assignment, check. You do the next assignment, check, finish, done. Don't touch it again. And that's not how animation works, right? Like if you do the bouncing ball once, that doesn't mean you never have to touch it again. I definitely like rushed through the program. And there were times where it's like, okay, I barely passed that class. I definitely didn't, okay, great. Time to do an acting shot with 2 characters. And it's like, oh, I barely had time to do the body mechanics of either character. I never really touched the hands. I have a couple poses on the face. I didn't really do most of the acting shot of 2 characters. On to the next class. I should have gone back and repeated stuff. Like I should have, I didn't realize how much more there was to actually, invest in learning to help for future. So, yes, I went through the whole program. I was definitely not hireable as an animator when I left because I didn't understand how you should be learning in any kind of a school for animation, which is, I don't feel like not talked about very often, but that was the thing.
No, that's interesting. It's interesting that you kind of tied it back to how you approach regular school. You mentioned being an academic and being AP classes, but also kind of more focused, I guess, on the extracurriculars even of all of that. And so it sounds to me like school probably came somewhat easily to you, right? I would assume in terms of grades or whatever. I was kind of that way. Like I was an academic and school. I got a straight A type kid, and school, you just did it and it was fine, but it was never like that hard for me. Animation is hard. Animation is the hardest thing I've ever had to learn, that and being a dad. But yeah, it's hard, and you have to put in the time, and if it isn't the type of thing that goes well if you try to build on it before you've kind of fully grasped a concept. You can definitely go too fast through it, to your point. And so looking back on it, it's good that you have that kind of insight about it. But I think it is also great that you touched on the power of good mentorship, like making those connections early on, keeping in touch when you can, and that's not going to be with every mentor, of course, or, every teacher. But when you have those people, who pour into you throughout your journey, it goes a long way, and it can really, kind of smooth your path and help you see things, a lot more quickly and a lot more clearly than you would on your own. So yeah, shout out to all the good mentors out there who've helped people on their way. So where in this process did you start I think I first came across your work in the, how to become an animator sort of like series you were doing. When did you start that? Was that while you were doing Animation Mentor or after, or like when did you decide, I'm going to kind of put a camera on this and sort of take people on the journey for like this path?
I had thought about it back when that first time in Cannes. I actually had the first thought of it when I was in France at the festival, dropping out of school, going, man, I wish someone had like documented like I wish that there was a resource to see like, how are you supposed to do this? How are you supposed to pick a school? Blah, 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 blah. But I didn't do it because at the time I was focused on just figuring it out. And then as I was an animation mentor, I was still thinking to myself, like, man, like this might be cool to like record. Like maybe I should start building some kind of a resource. Like, but I was always afraid that if it didn't work out, I never wanted to be the person who is like posting online, like, I'm going to do this thing. Wish me luck, everybody. And then I like fail. And like, I didn't get the job. Like that seems so scary to me. And also, I don't know, like I didn't want to seem, I was more concerned with what the perception would have been than I should have been. But it's the internet. It's kind of what happens as you think about those things. It's like, I don't want people to think that I'm trying to like, I don't know, get sympathy. It was a weird thing. Like it was this weird mental games with myself that was unnecessary. It wasn't until I was at DreamWorks that I was like, man, this would have been a really cool story. So like I, dropped out of school at this film festival, did Animation Mentor. I got hired to DreamWorks really quickly out of school, but not for animation, but like into a different, like this was still so cool. And I think I'd been at DreamWorks for several months. Oh no, actually, I think, yeah, well, I don't know. I'd been there for a little bit, maybe only like 2 months actually, now that I think about it. And I sort of just realized like this would have been really cool. Oh well. And I kept having that where I was like in Animation Mentor, it was the same thing where I was like, oh, I should have talked about this. Oh well. And it was always like this feeling that like, oh, it's too late. And then I realized at some point, like, why don't I just start now? And actually I have to give full credit to my wife, we were just dating at the time. She was the YouTuber first. When we were dating, she had a YouTube channel and she was trying to make that career. She was trying to turn that into a thing she could do to sustain herself. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And so I had been exposed to her making videos during the time we were dating. She was the one who encouraged me. She was like, just start the channel, just do it. And I'll tell you a secret second bit that I don't say very often, but it's a fun little piece of the story. I had a friend that we were no longer friends. We were friends for a long time. We were both creatively working on stuff together every now and then, but then we stopped getting along. We just kind of grew in different directions. And we really didn't get along at a certain point. And we were like, okay, we won't be friends anymore. And he started a YouTube channel on like a Saturday or something, which is part of the story here, is that like he was always really down on my wife. He was always making fun of her and like being really toxic actually about her being a YouTuber. It was, and so when he turns around and made a YouTube channel, like, oh, so he was just insecure and jealous about this whole thing. Like, no wonder he was so mean to you. I was so mad because I was like, you can't go and be like a bad person and then go make a YouTube channel to like, I don't know, try to posture and try to spread whatever you're trying to spread. Like, for every bad channel that exists or a creator who's like not in it for the right reasons, my perspective, there should be a balance. There should be another good channel that's created. So the next day is when I posted my first video. So I actually started my YouTube channel with the encouragement from a very positive source, but out of spite to balance what I viewed as a negative source. And so spite can be
I kind of love that. I kind of love that. Like the aspect of like the protective, like protecting your wife or girlfriend at the time or whatever. Like, I'll show you, and it's kind of like balancing it out. That's awesome. That's actually like such a good origin story.
I don't think I've ever told that. I don't think I've ever said that on like any kind of public thing. So hey, first exclusive
CG
here.
Riff exclusive. No, I sort of, yeah. I mean, because you always think that everything has some sort of like highbrow motivation or whatever, but there's something that I kind of love the pettiness, honestly, of that. It's like, okay, but yeah. No, I mean, so many people have benefited now, many years later, I don't know how many, tens of thousands or millions of views or whatever you have, but so many people have benefited from that. So thank you, whoever you are, you know who you are. Anyway, no, that's great. So it was, I guess you're saying after you had already gotten hired at DreamWorks, right? That you didn't then started this. Okay, so just back us up just a little bit and tell us like how did that come about? Because like you said, you didn't get hired there for animation, right into there, but you got your foot in the door, which I've heard you mention on other videos is a really good path and way that a lot of people do find their way into these studios, whether it's as a PA or whatever. Sometimes just getting in there can go a long way to at least get you access to resources and to the right, you're around the right brains and you're inspired by the creativity and you sometimes after hours you can hop on a box and do things or whatever. So kind of take us through that process. How did that come about?
100%. Yeah, I mean, so starting at the part of like the getting my foot in the door. So at the time, because there's two major animation events currently, right? At the time of us recording this, there's Lightbox Expo and there's CTN. CTN has been around for 20-ish years or so, and it was like the main and only event for a really long time. For anybody who, I don't know, doesn't know the full piece of it, they were around for a long time, and they were the only event, and everyone really liked them, and they got really big, but they were also not always the best organized, and so there was a little bit of drama that happened several years back where a bunch of artists kind of said, we're done with CTN, we're boycotting it. In fact, we're going to make our own thing. And they went and made Lightbox. And so we all benefit because now we have two events. And Lightbox seems to be the more popular at this point. And anyway, at the time though, CTN was the only event. And when I was in school and I was taking the community college classes, that was like, you've got to go to CTN and you can volunteer and you can get a free ticket at the time. Which I think they weren't allowed to do after a certain point because I think it was like, I don't know if it was like worker exploitation or something, or if it was just something changed, but it was like, you can't do that anymore. But anyways, while I was an animation mentor, I had volunteered a couple of times at CTN. I think it was before I started animation mentor, I went once. When I was in class 2, I went, and then I went again when I was finishing up class 5 or something like that. Or no, I was in class 6, about to finish class 6, which is the last class. So I went 3 different times. And it's important that I tell you that because for the story, the first year that I went and I volunteered, the way they used to do it is you would kind of you'd put a resume and I'd like to volunteer for this big list of roles. I didn't really know what most of them were, but one of them, there were a couple that I thought sounded really cool. There were some that were like door watcher. I'm like, I don't want to stand by a door all day and check badges. That doesn't sound like as much fun. What's something that sounds juicy, right? And I think I had one that was like stage manager. I was like, ooh, if I'm managing a stage, I could just stand and listen to the presentations rather than standing outside. So I had tried to pick something that sounded useful, but I didn't get anything I asked for. In my application for that, I had talked about the Cannes Film Festival. Like, oh, I went to this big event and like, there were all these celebrities and stuff. And like, I didn't freak out when I saw them. So like, I can keep my cool, lots of people, like high profile things. You need professionalism. I can do that. I've been in these situations where like, you can't go, oh my God, give me an autograph, sign my face. And anyway, so that, I think it was that part of the submission that I ended up getting put in the VIP check-in booth. And so I was responsible for like the green room where like people who have the VIP badges, speakers, they came in and they'd say their names. I'd check them off a list. I'd give them their badge. They'd go hang out, have some water, whatever, which is really funny because I didn't know enough animation trivia, I guess, at that point that like other people were like, okay, Glenn Keane. Yep. Here you are. Thank you very much. And everyone's like, how are you being so cool? I'm like, why, who is that? Like, I didn't know who anybody was. All right. James Baxter. Here you go. Nick Ranieri. He animated Hades? What? Oh, dang, I knew that earlier. I guess it's good I didn't. Oh, well, right? While working that booth, somebody came in. His name was Victor Tang, and he worked at DreamWorks. And he was in the education department as a research position, which was a really cool role inside of DreamWorks. Not every studio has this, but in their case at the time, they had a research department, which if an animator or any other production department needed resources, like, hey, like we need as many shots as we need clips from movies with like wind blowing the character's face, and we need like the like the cheeks flapping and whatever you got, we need that for the movie we're working on. And so the researchers, their job was to know movies, TV shows, pop culture, and be able to find that stuff and just deliver it super quick. Obviously animators can still find their own stuff, but if it's like, oh, we need a bunch of it for some reason. Anyways, Victor, I think he needed like a hotspot or something. Like he needed the Wi-Fi, but we didn't have it. So I offered to use my use my hotspot. Just like a normal, benign act of just like, oh, here, normal act of humanity, not a huge thing. But he was like, oh, that was really nice of you. And then he started chatting with me and we were just talking. And we connected. I think we connected on LinkedIn or email or something. And that was that. Like, oh, well, good to see you. Maybe I'll see you next year. And then the following year, that second year I was there, I emailed him, I think, a couple weeks before CT. I was like, hey, I don't know if you're going again. I'll be there. I'm going to be in a different area this time, but volunteering. And if you're around, love to say hi. And he replied, and I'm like, oh yeah, totally. So we caught up. I think we like met up around like a little coffee machine and talked for 15 minutes. And it was the same kind of, oh, what you been up to? Oh, I'm in school. I'm in class 2 of animation mentor, whatever. And like, oh, well, make sure to apply when internships exist. You give me some tips. And like, great. Well, thanks so much. Good to see you. Hope all's well, whatever. Third time, DreamWorks had just had a huge round of layoffs. And I remember like, oh, should I email him? What if he's not there? I don't know how layoffs work yet. And I emailed him and said, hey, and how do I, that was the other thing. Like, how do I professionally address something that like should I even say anything? I remember that being a thing I was worried about from a networking perspective. Like, how do you say that? Anyway, like, hey, heard about some stuff. Hope you're doing well. If you're at CTN, I'd love to say hi, grab lunch, something. And I think at that point, I was getting ready to finish school and apply for jobs. And I was hoping that maybe he had some tips for me, or that I could, like, oh, maybe we have built enough rapport that I can ask for like a resume review or something, because that'd be really helpful. And I think I said, like, and if you have any time, like, I'd love to run my resume by you, but no pressure. And sure enough, he said, yeah, I'd love to. Like, let's grab food on this day, schedule a time, Panda Express, across the street, whatever. And so that third year, yeah, we meet up, and he was unaffected by the layoffs, thankfully. And, for him and for me, because he gave me some of the best resume advice that I had ever gotten up to that point. A lot of it was like, hard worker, learned quickly, soft skills, take that all off. That's not useful. Like, you demonstrate that through the stuff and the other bullet points, blah, 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 blah. He kind of sparked my obsession with resumes, actually, because I love resumes and talking about resumes. But that was the first. Anyway, give me a ton of notes. apply for animation, apply for the stuff, let me see your demo reel. I'm not an animator, but I can look at it for you. Like, it's looking good, looking like you're learning. You should apply, try to get your foot in the door. And he was giving me that same advice. And I didn't know really, I was like, oh yeah, like I've heard stories of people becoming janitors or working in the lunchroom and like, getting after hours time on a computer or something. And he's like, well, I think our department's looking for somebody. Have you ever heard of the training department? I was like, no, I didn't know that was a thing. He's like, well, looking at your resume, maybe you should apply, because on my resume was, the stuff I've already talked about. But the other things I was doing were like, I had been making I worked at Best Buy for a while. So it was like Microsoft Office training and whatever. I had done like Chambers of Commerce business training in Microsoft Office, Excel, PowerPoint, whatever, because LA is expensive. And when I moved into the city of LA, my savings account's just draining slowly. I'm still working full time while I'm in school, and my account's just going down, down, down. And I'm getting to the point where okay, I've got like 2 months left before I'm out of money. I need to make some extra money. So I was basically making like Excel classes and Word classes for businesses in the area, kind of goofy stuff like that. And there's reasons why. There's like a whole, there's backstories to every backstory. But my background was in kind of like tech meets training, like computer science and tech meets like teaching. Even when I was an animation mentor and I grasped certain concepts, like when I was in AP classes, I was in calculus and I wasn't particularly good at calculus, but the one part of calculus I got really well was derivatives and integral graphs, which means nothing to anybody most likely. But when you look at that and you compare it to Maya, that's the graph editor. It's velocity and acceleration graphs, which is the graph editor, which was really annoying, realizing this thing. I was like, I'm never going to use this. I use it every day. But that was kind of like the parts of math that I got and understood became useful later. Like in an animation mentor, like, oh, the graph editor. Oh, that's easy. Everyone else in my class is like, what do you mean easy? This thing's weird. And so I started recording little mini tutorials for my classmates. Like, oh no, actually, I think it works like this. And if you put the points here, this is how easing works. Da 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 da. And so I was making little tutorials before I was doing that for YouTube. And that kind of stuff I had on my resume. And so all these like little mini teaching things, Victor was able to identify, like, it seems like you're doing some teaching stuff. You worked in the STEM center at your college. You tutored computer science, blah, blah, blah. You also have this like art stuff and creative stuff, and you've done some production stuff. You've whatever. You should apply to this training role we've got. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. Do you think I can do it? He's like, yeah, I think you should apply. And I did. And I have a whole video from I think it's my 5th How to Become an Animator video. It's like my interview at DreamWorks Animation, where I tell that full story. But because it was a train wreck, but it went super well. And anyways, through that sort of long-term friend making, which is essentially all networking is, and just being nice and trying to, ask for advice here and there, I was kind of guided to like, hey, you should apply for this. There's an opening. Here's also some notes for your resume. When you start talking to them, here's the name of somebody who works in that department, and I think you'd really like him. You should email him and maybe ask him for tips. That person, Tim Ingersoll, was friends with Sean Sexton, my mentor at the time, an animation mentor, and they were like longtime pals. And so I mentioned to Sean, like, oh yeah, like I think I'm applying for a job in Tim's department. He's like, oh, so I'm getting all this information from the network that I'm building as a student, not realizing that that's what's happening. So that by the time I do the interview and I do the all the stuff and I get the job, like I've got this little community of people who already helped me like get to that point. It was this combination of sort of, like you said, people pouring into the cup and helping, and also all the stuff I had done in my life that didn't seem related, but finding those connection points to be like, oh, these things actually are kind of guiding a path that help to, I don't know, create a resume, tell a story, to say like, actually, this is something that like I never would have known this existed without other people kind of helping me see it, but this is exactly where I need to be right now. And so in hindsight, it all works perfectly. But as I was going through it, it was a mess. but it worked out
Yeah,
great.
yeah, that's great. Like finding all those random kind of like scatter plot dots, but they're all like leading to this thing. But I love that while you were at Cannes, you manifested it. You said those are the guys I want to work with, and then could have been Blue Sky, could have been Sony, whatever. But that you like said that at Cannes, halfway across the world, and then ended up with enough connections in a way to find your way to DreamWorks
Oh,
is really awesome.
that was actually the craziest thing that I remember. It was like I was there like, oh wait, this is going to be a trilogy. I'm going to work on the third one. Completely unhinged to think that I'm going to get there for the third one. I worked on the third How to Train Your Dragon. Like I actually,
That's
you're
awesome.
right. Like that shouldn't have happened, but it did. It was very cool. You're right.
That's great. I mean, that's super inspiring to like have audacious goals, and you never know like what random thing you're doing is gonna pan out. But another thing you touched on that's so important, and I always try to tell my students is the power of networking. And I know it's a word that's sometimes kind of cringe, or people think like, oh, I don't want to just like get up there and like be fake and all this stuff. But I love how you kind of reworded that as like friend making, right? It's just being authentic, being yourself, putting yourself in the types of places where you can cross paths, with people, kind of making some of your own luck that Ben Willis talks about. But yeah, just surrounding yourself with creative people, and then just being a good person, right? You said you just let the guy borrow your hotspot, right? Just like you said, a nice act of humanity, right? But like planting that seed really kind of flourished by fostering that over a couple of years. I had a similar story where my first time, or one of my first times at CTN, I made a connection that I didn't know would yield anything, and a couple of years later led to one of my first big breaks of going up to ILM. So sometimes it's like the paths you cross in such a small industry, you never really know how it's going to play out or if it's going to play out, and you don't do it because it's going to play out. You just do it because you're being a good person, or just getting to know cool people, having nice conversations at places where people are inspired by creativity and whatnot. And oftentimes, like when you look back, then it all makes perfect sense, like how it comes together. So that's really, really beautiful. I love that. Cool. So you're at DreamWorks now. You're stepping into this new role where you're interfacing probably with people from every department, right? Because you're teaching on all the different software, as I understand, right? It's not just like not just animation, not just whatever. It's like everybody who needs to come learn something, and every new hire probably has to come to you, right? Especially a place like DreamWorks with proprietary software and whatnot. So now you're kind of the guy. You're sort of brushing shoulders with lots of people. What was that experience like? And at the same time, were you still were you viewing it at that time as still like a foot in the door towards trying to get towards this animation goal, and how did that kind of balance?
Yeah, yes, I still saw it as a foot in the door, but a really cool foot in the door. And as far as how that was, utterly terrifying. It was imposter syndrome like no other.
Yeah.
Also not helped by the fact that because of my sort of weird path of like, oh, I'll drop out and do the community college and switch to animation, whatever. I was 21 when I got hired at DreamWorks, which is very everyone I knew was still in college. The people who were my age at the studio were the interns, and I was there working full time, which on one hand was like this cool badge of honor, like, wow, I got here so quickly. But also I now tell people when I say that, I'm like, also like, don't, like, that's not normal. That also wasn't necessarily the best thing in certain ways, looking back, because there was so much that I hadn't yet developed and like learned about myself to prepare me for a role like that. Maybe we'll come back to that. But like when I got there, super terrifying, because you're right. I met everybody. Every single new hire to the company came through training, and I'd meet everybody on the first day. They spent their whole first week or two with me, depending on the department. I taught over 50, I think I taught 54 classes, some of it proprietary stuff, some of it not. And it didn't start with animation. It was, I think I was put on like surfacing and lighting first, which were two of my weakest areas. But I received, I got hired as a training assistant originally, but within a couple of weeks, it was like, oh, you could actually be a trainer. So I kind of got like a weird half promotion almost immediately, which was really cool. It was like, oh, like you could actually help train. That's really good. Here, do that. And so I was given a lot of those extra, like, oh, well, let's get you trained in Torch, which was the DreamWorks proprietary lighting tool, which they actually now no longer use. So that information is useless. But yeah, anyways, I got put on those things, meeting all these people. It was, I think, really helpful getting to just be exposed to that level of broad creativity from all these different aspects, departments, different parts of the company. It was really helpful to sort of just understand how animation works and get that crash course in like what studio really is, and not just the sort of pedestal version of it. When you see it from the outside, like, wow, there's these beings of light that float through the halls and they make these movies through their breath on the canvas. It's like, oh no, like they're just regular people. They go to work. Some of them get burnt out and jaded and they're like tired of being there. And they're like, oh, I might switch to another studio. Like, it's a job. And you don't realize, like, oh, like this is an amazing job and a cool place to work and all this cool stuff. But like this is like, it's no different than like they still get up and put on clothes and go to work. Like, it was sort of an eye-opening experience just to realize, like, oh yeah, this isn't as unattainable to work somewhere like this as I had thought. It's still for sure super challenging to like get in and all the different things, but like anybody can do it. It's sort of that, like the Ratatouille thing, like anybody can cook. Like, yeah, like it's, you know, it was also really cool realizing, yeah, like I wasn't ready to be an animator. I didn't get hired into the animation department. I still wanted to get there. That was my goal and remained to be my goal while I was working in the training department. But it was very much like, wow, this is a really cool opportunity. I know nothing about like the training landscape at DreamWorks, but I'm going to learn really quickly, get really good at it. And I sort of put animation on the back burner for a while, mostly just so I could do justice to the job I'd been hired to do. I didn't want to be like half in, half out, you know, like, oh, let me do the job, but I'm really trying to get into animation. You know, nobody hired me for that. They want me to do the thing I got hired to do. So I want to make sure I'm good at that first. Then I'll figure out animation. And luckily, I mean, being in training was probably the best place I ever could have started, not just because of the people I'm meeting, not just because of the exposure I had to the whole pipeline and the business in general, but also from a technical perspective. As someone who really likes to learn, especially like learning software and exploring those different avenues, getting to sit in on all these classes and all these speakers and all that kind of stuff, I learned so much about stuff that I never would have looked into myself, as well as finding out like, wow, like I was probably one of a handful of people in the studio who could like make their own shots. Not that you weren't allowed to, it's just there's a handful of people who do that. Animators don't typically make their own shots. They get shots assigned to them and they do that. Their job is to work on the stuff, not to do the pipeline part that sort of generates shots. Mm-hmm. And so for me to be able to create, like, I'm going to create a shot and I'm going to put Shrek and Hiccup and Toothless and Alex from Madagascar. I put all of them in the same file. There happened to be a way to like actually get them all in the same file. That normally isn't a thing, crossing the characters, but there was a project where that for some reason was possible. But I could do that, and I could put all the assets, and I could put in whatever world from Kung Fu Panda I wanted, and I could animate them. And like, I remember there were other people at the studio who would stay late, and they'd come to training, and they'd be like, "Hey, there's a computer lab here. I'm trying to be an animator, but I work in this other department. Do you work in here?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is my department. This is my desk. This is a training lab. Feel free, grab whatever. And if you need any help, like, I can set up shots for you." So I was able to help other aspiring animators do what I was trying to do, as I'm just in my regular little cubicle, because I had that training access, or that access to the training department, just built into my job. So it was really cool for me, and it was also really cool for the being able to help other people, which was always something I just enjoy doing.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that teaching through line that kind of keeps popping up right from pretty early on, and that you found your way there. Obviously, you know, in the interest of time, I'm going to sort of pull us forward into the Sir Wade that I know and know of. Is just you're just a huge wealth of knowledge and you know, well seasoned at this point in teaching. You're able to kind of say things plain to people who maybe aren't always super academic or whatever, just excited about learning a thing, and you have this sort of approachability, at least to the content that I've interfaced with, to you know, things that are maybe, you know, outside of somebody's comfort zone. I for one, I've never been particularly technical, but you're like my go-to guy when you're talking about like setups, when you're talking about like GPUs or like actual, like, the, you know, I love when you do like the tour of like, this is all the equipment I have. These are the mics, and this is the kind of stand you need, and the kind of standing desk. I'm like feverishly taking notes, because I'm like, oh, I don't know this stuff, right? Even when I started like doing the podcast, I'm like, I got to refer back to this stuff. I'm like, oh, what's a good mic to get? What's a, you know, so I love that you've got this sort of just natural ability to you know, make information accessible and plain to the people out there looking for it, at a much in my experience, at least, a much more useful way than what you talked about before, which was available back in 2010, 2013 or whenever. So that's awesome. So when did you know? I guess you said pretty early on in your time at DreamWorks, you started making the animation content, and had a wife who was already more well versed, I guess, in that space in terms of YouTube as a way to sustain yourself, and kind of making the I guess career pivot to doing more of that full time. Like how did that come about? Can you kind of talk about like did it start getting big? Did you start getting kind of a lot of eyeballs on those earlier videos, or like when does one know that that's even viable, or is that just a huge leap of faith and it just kind of comes together?
For sure, a leap of faith. I mean, I was not making any kind of significant money when I made the decision to go. So what happened was I started the channel, how to become an animator series. Let me just document my process. Here's my story. Here's what I've done. Here's some info about my interview, blah, blah, blah. And then I started doing videos. I'm like, oh, here's a workflow. Here's a Maya tip. And I had one video pop off, which was putting a 3D character on the couch next to me. I think it was just a single frame, but that video went viral. And I think now it remains my highest view video on the channel, like 3 point something million or something, which is crazy. And that video is the thing that like so many people found my channel, which was really cool. It gave me a lot of confidence in like, wow, I must be doing something right. Also gave me a huge amount of anxiety when like, I remember a recruiter came in to DreamWorks, got hired her first day. Her name is Cynthia, very nice. We're all good friends now. But she was like, oh, my husband watches your YouTube videos. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. That's tell him thank you. Why does he like? Oh, he's an animator at Disney. Oh God, what? I remember the terror in that moment of like people who already work in this industry are now watching and judging. No, that was the first time that ever happened, and it was horrifying. But anyway, that process was just like, I'll just make videos and try to be generally helpful. That went on for a while until I had been at DreamWorks for about 2 years. Let's do another exclusive. I'll tell you, there is a video on my channel.
Give up the goods.
Video on my channel called Why I Left DreamWorks. Every word spoken in that video is true. The gist of it was I was applying for an animation position on Dragons 3 because I had been working on the training stuff. And I was like, oh, I want to work on the actual animation team. And I got some really great feedback. And it was basically like, okay, show us a little bit of cartoony stuff because we've got other cartoony stuff like Trolls 2 coming down the pipe. Like, if you can show some extra cartoony stuff because that's what's missing from your reel. And it was sort of like the ... Like, I wasn't told explicitly anything, but it was like, like smiles and nods of like, it's looking pretty good. Show us a little bit more. And I remember thinking, if I get that job, I'll never leave. Like, I will not have the courage to leave the animation department because that has been my dream, my goal. That's like where I set out to go. And I'm so close to it now. I'm sure I'll find other goals beyond that, but I was afraid to get there. When I had this YouTube thing that I was like, this is so cool though. This is different. This is weird. This was not what I set out to do, but I've really enjoyed making these videos. The comments of people who are like, this is really helpful. Oh my God, this is, that was so rewarding in a very different way that I was like, maybe I try to do that for a year. Because if I can get to DreamWorks and if I can get close to like where I think I'm hireable, then presumably I could come back to this point easier than if I lose the opportunity and the momentum I have to do this YouTube thing. No one else is doing this yet. I want to see what I can do with it. I'm going to take 1 year. I'm going to try freelance to sustain myself because this isn't making any money yet. And I'm going to try and do YouTube as like my main thing. I'm going to take a year of risk. And that was basically the gist of that video and what I decided to do at the time. But there's a second secret reason that I left DreamWorks that I've talked about it, but it's usually like in small groups. I've never shared it. It's been long enough. I think I can share it now. DreamWorks was bought by NBC, Comcast, NBC Universal. And that was rough. It was a rough time. I like to think of it as I worked at DreamWorks for 2 years. The first year was one studio. The second year was a very different studio. After the buyout, there were mass layoffs. My department was cut 80%. I was one of 4 or 5 people remaining in the department. And I absorbed the majority. Well, I don't know if that's fair to say. I absorbed at least like 5 different people's workloads. into like what I was doing. And my team was really good. Like we were really capable. We did a really good job, I think, of what we did in Gap. We had what was called Dream Time. Because we had this period in the middle where like everything got paused at the studio. It was like, okay, we got bought. They got to evaluate. They got to look at some stuff. They're getting rid of redundant positions and a bunch of other stuff. Layoffs. Everyone stop what you're doing. That movie we're about to work on, Larrikins, cancel it. We're not sure we want to go with that. Probably not. We'll wait for Dragons. So pause. To not lay everybody off, we need to have people do something. Training department. Occupy everyone's time at the studio. There's 4 of us left, 5 of us left. Okay. Like one person kind of got moved to another department. Like there's 4.5 of us left. Like, okay. And so we did that for a while. And without getting too specific, the person who was running our department, who was wonderful, best boss I ever had, she got let go in what I, in my opinion, think was studio politics. And because she was great. She was fantastic. And somebody else was brought in that, you know, he definitely wasn't as passionate and he didn't empower the people who worked with him. I felt like I worked with my previous boss. I felt like I worked for the new person, and it was a very different dynamic. And I struggled with it a lot. And we didn't get along super well, which is, I've really not had any interpersonal issues with anybody in the industry except for 2 people. One person was the person who is now in charge of me and was very micromanaging. And it was a whole thing that I, to remain professional and to not put any kind of blame where I shouldn't. I don't talk about it very often, but it's something that's very real. And it was an experience that I wasn't ready for. And I was really new to it. And I was still so young. So I also had a lot to learn about how to handle that kind of situation. Mm-hmm. The thing that made it so complicated, and this is the fun little zesty part here, is that in those situations, you look to HR to help resolve these things. The head of HR at the company at the time is the person who made the swap of the roles and knew the new person who came in. This person, who was the head of HR of the company at DreamWorks, called me into a couple basically disciplinary meetings, which my whole team was like, what? And said some really illegal stuff to me. It was a situation where I was like, I don't think you can tell me that, but you're the person that I would report this to. Oh, I don't know what to do now. And it was pretty clear that this person just really didn't like me. And I was essentially told, like, if it were up to me, I never would have hired you because of X, Y, and Z reasons, which were illegal reasons. I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And lucky for me, this person was caught up in sort of a mass. There was the new CEO at DreamWorks kind of got rid of a bunch of people. Like the culture here is getting really weird. Let me get rid of a bunch of people. This person was in that, like, okay, that was a person who wasn't making the experience better for a lot of people. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. But the person who was still in charge of me still had a lot of that energy. For like between us, we didn't get along super well. And I was like, oh, this is really hard. And so I worked for about a year under a very different system where it was like I'd have to come in an hour early. This person would look at my calendar. Okay, so what do you have on your calendar? What's this meeting? No, you won't go to that. I'll go to that. Like, oh, I've been working on this project for like 6 months. That's okay. Give me your notes. I'll take it from here. Like, I was really looking forward to that. It was really rough.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a whole nother interview on its own, but that was hard. And I remember the final straw for me, it was right before we went on we got a 1-week Christmas New Year's break. And I went to the office of my boss and I said, hey, you've taken away my Maya classes. Basically said, like, don't teach Maya anymore. I want to teach Maya. You teach something else. You've taken away my After Effects classes. You've taken away these other classes. You've now told me that you don't want me teaching the animation classes anymore. That's the whole reason I'm here. Please don't take it from me. Please let me keep teaching those. I'm an animator. I'm actually trained as an animator. I know what the buttons do. I know what the tools are for. I have the context. I know what every button in that software does at this point. I even had a day where I taught it verbally because my computer went down and I drew the software in real time. I was like, okay, click this button. The 5th option down is going to say this. When you open it, it goes to this window. And then that's going to actually have 3 different options. Taught a whole class like that because I had to for some reason. And I was like, please don't take this from me. I love this part of my job. And he sort of just said, tough. When we get back from break, that's mine.
Hmm.
And it was crushing. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And I went home for the break. And I remember coming back, like it was the Sunday before coming back to work. And I remember just sitting at my desk in our living room with I think we were my fiance at the time. We were engaged. And, or were we just married? No, we just got married. We had just recently been married. And I remember sitting there, I was like, I love my job, but I hate going to work. I can't do it anymore. I don't even think I can last to like get my demo reel to where it needs to be. And even if I get there, I'm afraid of what that'll mean because I won't be able to leave if I get the job. And what if I want to try something else? I don't know. And I remember just thinking like, what if we talked about it? We're like, what if I didn't go back? What if we break our lease? What if we put everything in storage? What if we like try something different? Then I don't have to like do this anymore. What if I just didn't have to? And what if we just try to be like travel vloggers and we'll try to do YouTube full time? We'll try to do this like thing together, but then you'll have your channel, I'll have my channel. We'll try to like travel vlog, maybe as a group channel or something. Maybe that'll find some way to make us money. I don't know. I'll do freelance, whatever. Let's try it. And we're both really sort of high risk, high reward people. And she was like, yeah, you're miserable. Let's do something. So that night, broke our lease, sent a letter to the leasing office, wrote my resignation letter, came in on the Monday and said, I'll be here for, I think I said like 6 weeks. I was there for a little bit longer. I want to actually offload my work properly, like, exit without putting my team in the worst of a position because we had a lot going on. And I was to myself, I'm like, I'm going to record the greatest training videos for DreamWorks' animation software Primo that have ever existed, that have everything that I know in those videos, so that there's no reason for him to like take them and make them worse, because I felt like he wasn't going to do them justice. I'm like, I'm going to make those videos awesome. And my last day at DreamWorks, I like dragged my feet because he kept being like, I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna be there in the class. I'm gonna absorb it from you. And I was like putting it off. I'm like, no, like you need to hire an animator to do the training or bring in someone from the department. Like, it can't be you. You don't care about this thing. I don't know. That might have been youth and ego a little bit, but like I really didn't feel that he was going to do it justice. And so my last day at DreamWorks, or second to last day, because my access was going to cut me off at 6 p.m. on my last day. So the day before that, I stayed all night at the studio. Those videos are still used to this day at DreamWorks. If an animator gets hired at the studio, they watch my Primo videos 1 through 6, and you can see the time in the corner of the clock. The system clock is like, oh, it's like 10 p.m. By the 6th video, it's like 4:30 in the morning. I've got the rings under my eyes, and I'm like, all right, so this button right over here, it's gonna. And anyway, that was a big part of why I had to go. But while it was a really unpleasant reason to leave such a wonderful place, it was the catalyst I needed to make a change that I otherwise wouldn't have been strong enough to do on my own.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I look back at it with really mixed emotions, but it was such the right decision to leave when I did for so many different reasons. But I've really been oddly grateful for the experience, even though I don't know if I'd want it to happen if I could do it again, but like it was good,
Yeah, your story is so fascinating because there's these sort of like ups and downs and like false starts almost, seemingly, right? Of like, oh, and then I went to this school, but then that wasn't the right place, and then but knowing where you've ended up, and it seems like you're thriving and doing well. It's so clear that each of those things was sort of necessary. And thank you for being so vulnerable and candid with that, because I think, like you say, when people are outside of the studio system, they look at it with these rose-colored glasses and the pedestal, like you mentioned, and oh, everything's so great. But yeah, I mean, there's still office politics, and there's layoffs, and there's one toxic person can ruin a whole situation, right? They said one bad apple can spoil the bunch, right? And yeah, I mean, you hope not to run into too much of that. I found that in this industry that most people do tend to be pretty chill, pretty generally okay. You can count usually on one hand the jerks that have kind of made it really bad for people. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you're on the wrong end of somebody who's kind of dead set on making it suck. At a place that all the stories about DreamWorks are how great it is. The food is free and all this type, whatever. It's like it's like Shangri-La type of thing. Yeah, thank you for being sort of vulnerable with that, because I think it does kind of it makes it real, that, you know, it is still a job and you have to pull yourself out of bed and go there every day. And if somebody is sort of, you know, kind of taking a little of that luster off of it, then that's unfortunate. But like you said, it gave you the catalyst to leave a place that is probably very hard to leave, you know, outside of a layoff or something like that. And it gave the world, you know, a very, you know, valuable resource in a place where, you know, there in my opinion, you know, have never have been that many consistently good ones. When people kind of start out, even me, I have some videos on my YouTube, and there's kind of boring tutorials like you talk about, right? Where it's like, okay, let me just do this thing and put it up there. But to consistently stick with it and literally having hundreds of videos, you know, all done with passion and at a high level, that's a legacy that, you know, long after you decide to stop doing this, you know, the nature of the internet is that people will continue to find those videos and watch those videos. I saw the one about why you pivoted and left the industry. I wanted you to, you know, record that here, obviously for the podcast, but you've always kind of had that vulnerability, that kind of human touch of like, you know, this, sometimes you think this is your dream job and you're doing a thing, and then you realize that hey, maybe I'm gonna just leap, you know, take the, and like you said, maybe part of it is maybe because you're young enough to kind of have that sort of like, you know, risk taking side of you still kind of, you know, fully intact. But I think that's really awesome, and it's just a testament to being willing to try things and you know, deviate from the path that you think that you're on, and how sometimes it can be that much more fulfilling and rewarding in the long run. And it doesn't mean that you fully turn your back on any one option, because even how you approached it, how you talked about, oh, I'm going to try this for a year, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't, you know, I've still got all of these skills and all these things I know I can return to this place or a place like this place. And so, yeah, I mean, I really applaud your courage to do that. And yeah, I mean, can without going into details, can you speak to what that journey has been like? I from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're thriving, and it's been rewarding. I see the plaque behind you there. Your YouTube has gone well, right? Yeah. Can you speak to how all that's played out?
Sure. I mean, my year of risk has now been going on for like 8 years or something. It never ended. I ended up really, I mean, you're entirely right. False starts and a lot of failure are kind of like the trademark of how this all comes together, but that's creative industries. That's kind of how we do stuff. And yeah, if you're okay with that, which I am okay with, you know, it's not always fun in the moment, but like I am okay with failure ultimately with some time to reflect. And luckily that's kind of gone to this path of, I tried freelance for that first year and it worked out-ish. I didn't really have a freelancer network, which was really hard. Tried all the websites, not very successful. People really don't want to pay for animation on freelance things. Oh, can you turn me into a character and put me in a web series and I don't have any money? Then no, I can't help you. I'm sorry. That was rough. So I did a lot of like VFX-y jobs. Like I'll remove staples from the bottoms of couches for commercials and, you know, things like that. Good work, but not the stuff I was hoping for. There were a couple of projects that came up that seemed too good to be true, and they were, and I was really glad to have been careful. Like, here's this, like, it's always an Avengers thing. Like, here's this like Avengers commercial for an air conditioning unit, but we don't have assets for you. You're gonna have to, like, oh, if you don't have assets, that doesn't sound like an officially like Marvel licensed, Disney approved prop. Like, I'm not playing with the mouse as lawyers, so no. We'll give you lots of money. Like, no, not worth it. Glad I didn't take that one. But a year of attempted freelancing. Luckily, after that year, my wife's YouTube channel started actually making money. We basically packed up our lives, stuck it in storage. We moved into the basement of my parents' house. They had moved from California to Minnesota, very cold. And so we lived in their basement for like 8 or 9 months or something like that, which like the dead of winter, negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, not super fun to like be in Minnesota in those cold things, from like nice California to that. So we tried to basically take the rent money that we were no longer spending in California and travel and try to be travel vloggers. That didn't work. We were not cut out to be travel vloggers. That's hard. That's a lot harder than it seems. And ultimately, that's when I started doing most of my tutorials of like Graph Editor 101 and whatever other videos I was doing at the time. I was starting to find the voice of my channel. My wife was doing, she was doing fashion videos primarily at the time. She still mostly does, but that was her main thing at the time. And basically, when her channel started to make money, we moved back to LA. and I was continuing just doing tutorials and stuff, not making much money. I think it was another year or so, I got my first sponsorship at CTN. Funny enough, it was Adobe
Mm.
who basically said, "Hey, have you heard of this event called CTN?" I had gone to all these conventions, networking, that same thing of trying to go to like events from a YouTube perspective and connect with brands and connect with other creators and figure out how do you make good thumbnails and how do you edit videos for like retention, and without getting too gross about it, because at the time, now it's very like, I don't know, it's very like Mr. Beastie now. Like, you gotta click the rates, and at the time it was a little bit less like that. Like, oh no, like you need to have a face on your thumbnail. Like, oh, does that make a difference? Like, yeah, it makes a pretty big difference when people actually have someone to look at. Like, oh, okay, guess it makes sense. People didn't know that at the time, or at least I didn't. And so a lot of those events, connected with brands, met Adobe at something, had them in the inbox, luckily, and they reached out and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of CTN?" I'm like, "I have heard of CTN. Well, we're going to go this year. We have some stuff we're going to show off. Would you want to do a video on your channel, just like talking about, what we're doing and blah, blah, blah?" And they actually paid me money to like do video stuff. And that was my first sponsorship. And that experience of like working with a company, figuring out the contracts, like I was always good at the businessy stuff for actually like reading and negotiating contracts. But that sort of opened my mind to like, oh, okay, so that's how that works. Like I've done it a little bit on my wife's channel, but very different industries. It's a little bit hard to transfer the knowledge. So starting to finally get to do that with mine, I was like, okay, now I know what I'm looking for. I know now what they want from these videos, what's in their like talking points, their briefs, what they're hoping to get in return for the money. Maybe I can start pitching some stuff, and ended up working with NVIDIA and other companies. Eventually, that snowballed. I should have learned that industry. That's a whole nother job that I now do on top of everything else. And fast forwarding, now I feel like I animate so much less than I do the job of YouTube. And I almost feel like I have three main jobs where I'm doing 3D art, whether that's animation specifically or other parts around it. There's the YouTube video creation that I spend a lot of my time doing. And then I do a lot of either not service work or freelance as much as sort of like I do a lot of consulting. I was just in Singapore like a week ago. I'm teaching a virtual production workshop thing, training thing for a company out there. So I do a lot of sort of this blend of training, creative work, and like businessy stuff where I'm sort of the middleman between these companies. Like, we all have these problems and we need this technological solution, but we don't know what to do. And like, I know the tech solution. I can be the tech guy and the creative person and the business person all in one, and I can train people on what needs to happen. And so I have those different parts of my background and past in the same way as before, all the scatter points. Like, I've now found a way to take all of that, turn that into a role and say, I can help. And now that's kind of the weird amalgamation of what I do that takes up all my time.
There's a kind of genius in what you just described. You seem very fortunate to, or very capable at taking all of the things, all of the stuff you've dragged behind you through life, and now at this point, connecting it and capitalizing on all of those things. I think about this a lot, where it's like I've given so much of myself to like the one thing that I do, but I also do a lot of other things pretty well, right? But I've not figured out how to like also do voiceover work and also do play the drums, or I do all these like things, but like it's like so much to get like feature level good at animation that I all these other things are just there and kind of like by the wayside. And I spent a lot of years doing a thing. But they've not come together as beautifully, I think, as this, like you said, this amalgamation of all these different things through your journey is pretty awesome. And you are like, the most qualified in a lot of ways person to do some of these things because of all those different random seemingly random experiences. And that's like so inspiring and like yeah, pretty amazing that you figured out how to to pay your bills doing all of the different things that you're kind of like uniquely qualified to do, which is cool. Yeah, that I'm jealous. I think that's really awesome. Really neat. Like hearing how that all kind of has come together. One thing I did want to touch on, I want to be respectful of your time because we're kind of over already, but I wanted to ask, because some of your earliest videos, and you mentioned before that you were big into parkour. Do you still do it?
I can. I don't very often because I no longer live near a parkour gym where the floors are spring floors and it's safer for my older
knees and
and
stuff or
slightly
whatever.
heavier
Yeah.
physique. I still can though. Muscle memory goes a long way, and I still enjoy the bits that I do, but I don't at the level I used to.
It's so interesting because I teach a lot, and I know you teach as well now. And one of the things obviously in all like the animators like advanced body mechanics classes or whatever is everyone's got their like parkour shot, and usually I teach people like their reference workflow and all this type of stuff, but that's usually for acting shots, and we always say, okay, when it's parkour or something like this action stuff, you got to go to the internet or find your reference. But it's like you're one of the few animators I know who can like get out there and you and like Michael Kiley or whatever who like can actually get out there and like do this awesome stuff and do their own reference for those types of like body mechanic shots and stuff, and I think that's pretty awesome. I just wanted to touch on that. I didn't know how to kind of weave it into your journey, but I think that's another thing that another kind of side interest that probably played in well while you were doing mechanics classes or handling mechanics shots, that you have
oh my
a
gosh,
very specific understanding of how the body works and transferring weight and all these types of things.
That was a huge
really,
thing.
really good.
Yeah, when I was a student, there was the only shots that I had in my reel that were any decent, like they were decent to look at all. It was the parkour shots because I knew what to do. And I was always like, who can I have this, I could probably find it and send it to you if you want to drop it in, but like I have this old clip of like me doing this like stunt fall over and over and over, and it ends with this little meme of a person like full body cast. It's like, if you guys need reference, let me know. Like, so I used to do reference for other classmates and stuff too. Yeah.
No, that's great. Like, yeah, you have all like the recipe ingredients to like become the superpower you've become. I love that. This is really great. I'm glad I reached out to you. I don't even know if you remember, but I briefly ran into you at CTN one year, the first time I like met you in person. But I've been kind of again watching your work and been a fan of your videos for a long time. But I'm just so grateful for you stopping by. So many of the people we've had on this channel since we started the podcast are titans of character animation specifically, right? James Baxter came by and Brenda Chapman and all these people who spent decades in the industry at the highest levels, supervisors and animation directors and all these types of things. But especially here for season 2, we've tried to kind of vary the voices a little bit, because I love just hearing inspiring journeys and people, at different levels of their career, people who are, less, fewer decades of experience in these types of things. And I think it's really just so fascinating how you've kind of touched a lot of different things and have clearly had a broad set of interest, but just crafted them into such a what I think is just a really beautiful life, a really beautiful story. Like I say, I'm kind of jealous that in a lot of ways you get to kind of call your own shots at this point, which I know is there's a satisfaction in that. And you get to continue to just explore and delve into technologies and new softwares are constantly coming out. Obviously AI is like doing all this stuff now, that you could spend the time and like devote the time into learning those things, breaking it down and then communicating it to other people is really quite awesome. So yeah.
Thank you.
There's no question in that, but yeah, that's just kind of me. Me just gushing on what I think is a pretty awesome path so far. So let me just ask briefly before we close, just looking forward, what's next for Sir Wade? What other aspirations do you have? What types of things do you hope to continue to do as you grow your following, grow your is there anything you'd like to plug? This is kind of a big kind of closing question, but just looking forward, what types of things are on the horizon for you or still excite you?
Well, many things still excite me. I mean, if I feel like I have answers in like all these different silos, but to keep it not a whole, I'm very long-winded, as you can now see, and as you probably, even in my videos, it's so hard to cut the stuff down. But what's next? I guess, immediate stuff. I'll be at Lightbox. If I don't know when this editing process wise when this comes out exactly, but I'll be speaking at Lightbox. I have a couple talks. Well, I'll be jumping into the actual like content creation back end of like how I do the business part of what I do. And I'm going to share like, here's my pie chart of how I make money doing this job. I hope that helps.
Awesome.
So I have some stuff at CTN Lightbox doing that. I have a booth, which is going to be cool. And then I might have some event stuff that is unconfirmed. So I can't say for sure yet, but hopefully there's some other cool stuff happening there. I have a variety of classes and things that I I love teaching, obviously, and I'm always trying to share the knowledge there make information accessible for free on YouTube for not a ton of money on my courses. I'm one person, and so I can usually do stuff at a more flexible level than some of the larger institutions, just so everybody has a place to go. And other than that, it's sort of just an adventure of like the weirdest stuff that pops up. Like I mentioned the Singapore thing, like I'm teaching virtual production now, which is like a whole nother side of animation in 3D that I never really expected to get into. When I moved to New York, I set up a virtual production thing. Like, I'm interested in having a background that's different, and learning how to do that became another thing to drag along that led me to through all these other things of now I do a lot of training for Epic Games and Unreal Engine, which is super cool. People should look into that. I recently was like, hey, you mentored this animation fellowship with Epic. Do you know virtual production? Like, kind of. Yeah, I've been playing with it. Like, great. Do you want to go to Singapore and teach them how to do it? Like, yeah, that sounds cool. So I don't have really an answer to like what comes next specifically, because it's sort of everything's always changing, especially with the social media part of my job, which I really like that variety. And that's a big part of why I enjoy doing what I do. But yes, of course, I always have my own aspirations, mostly rooted in trying to help people learn whatever it is I can help with. And so through the stuff I'm doing at Lightbox, or other events that I speak at, or courses on my own, or YouTube videos, there's always some part of trying to do more and bigger things for the good of the animation community. So yeah, long answer.
Well, I gotta say, you've certainly made your mark. Like you said, even the stay up all night videos that you left for teaching Primo at DreamWorks. I think so many people will continue to benefit from the things that you've made, and so you have a outsized impact on this community, whether you realize it or not. So thank you for that. I will say, as I understand it, the courses that you teach, are they geared towards or great for beginners who are interested in like just starting out in these different things?
Yeah, I have sort of two lines of classes that I'm looking to develop a little bit more. I don't know specifically, but I have like software workshops where it's like Maya, everything you need to know to animate a Maya. There's like an advanced one, and then there's also like Maya Essentials, which I actually don't think it's on the website as of today, but maybe by the time people see this, I'll fix that. But yes, I have like a beginner Maya class. That's just what you need to start animating. A big Maya thing for when you know how to animate and you want to know everything else Maya has to offer. I have an Unreal Engine one. I don't think I've published the Blender one yet, but then I have animation classes that start at the beginning.
That's great. No, the primary reason I asked, first of all, I want you to plug it. I want all of you, if you've not already followed any of Sir Wade's stuff, follow all of it, please. But no, so none of my classes at CG Riff are. I have people approach me who like they want to. How do you bounce the ball? How do you open my? Like I don't have any beginner stuff at all. Like you interface with me when you want to like. You're already kind of probably can do lip sync or something, right? And so I always kind of like want to have good resources to point people to who want to, start out. They say, "Oh, I have a nephew who's interested in animation." I'm like, I can't really help you directly there, but yes, please check out Sir Wade's stuff. Like I say, I frequently go to your videos when I just like need to remember how to do some like simple thing in some program that I don't use that often or whatever. So you're really great, approachable content for that. Thank you so much for stopping by again. We're really excited to keep an eye on you and continue to see what types of content you're putting out, what types of courses you're offering. Like I say, there's a handful of people who pop in my head when I think about people who kind of putting, just producing resources, just kind of putting that kind of light out into the industry in that way, that like I say is going to long out, not to get morbid, but long outlast, outlive you. But no, thank you for that. I don't even know if you realize how big and how much of an impact it has, but I appreciate people like you, and that there are people out there who are just good people who, even if it started for petty reasons, are putting good out into the world that everyone can benefit from. So thank you so much again for stopping by, Sir Wade. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you listeners for sticking with us. We got many more great episodes coming. Be sure to like and subscribe. We got a lot more great episodes planned throughout the end of the year to wrap up this season. Thank you all, and we'll see you here next time on CG Riff. Good night.
Thank you.